Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode on the Lessons from the Game podcast. And today I'm joined with my co host, Ben Wegner, and we got a special topic lined up. We're going to talk about why players or teams struggle to transfer what they're actually training in the week to the game. We've been speaking to a lot of coaches and players that are struggling to understand that having a good training week, and when the game comes, boom, nothing happens, nothing there. But before we get stuck in that, Ben, brother, how are you doing? How's things going?
Good, G. Yeah, busy week and all go, but yeah, all good.
We've both
You
been
okay?
under the pump, eh? I think
Yeah, man.
that's the phrase of the week. Under the pump, under the pump.
Yeah,
Now all good,
trying to
man.
make it happen.
Sticking to my training and trying to stick to my sleeping routine as well. It's been now 2 weeks consecutively where I've been getting more than 7 hours a night, which is great. But I think tonight's not going to be one of those. But who knows? Ben, decided to talk about this topic, or we decided to talk about this topic because we potentially might be doing a masterclass at the back of this. So we're doing our research and our due diligence now about it. But it's a topic that really interests me, but also a lot of coaches in my school community have been asking me about this. What do you think is one of the reasons like players are training well, but when it comes to the game, it's like they're not there? And this is at all levels. We've seen it in the highest level, the top 14. Guys are training well. Then it comes to the game, nothing. We've seen also with the rugby championships. Sometimes the ABs were right up there the following week, they weren't good, and vice versa with the Boks, and the same with Argentina, taking 60 points the week before, and the following week they came close to beating the Boks. So this is quite an interesting topic to have, because we're both passionate about mindset and how the players work, how teams work, the dynamics. And so I think, Ben, what's your point of view on this topic? And is there maybe some reasons that you have why you think what we train doesn't always transfer to the actual game?
Yeah, G. I think it's quite complex, but I think there's quite a few reasons in the main. It's, I think, to do with things like, does the training actually look like the match? Do players have to make decisions in training that reflect what they actually have to do in a match, or is it a very specific closed drill that doesn't involve a lot of variables? And as soon as they're fatigued and in a match, there's no correlation between what they've been doing in training and then the scenario that they then face in the match. I also think that, the way that the person processes, and the player will have, if there's a feedback loop. So if you self-analyze a match and you watch something, you then take ownership, you understand, and then you have a corrective behavior in training because of what you've seen. If you're, lazy, or you haven't taken that on board yourself and you haven't done the self-analysis and you're relying on someone else just to tell you, then you're not going to own that feedback loop, and it's going to be something that you're just going to keep missing out the section that allows you to filter and understand and process what you can do differently. And then the final thing, I think, every time, this, I remember being told this years and years ago, but someone told me that every time you tell somebody what to do, you take away a learning process or experience for them. So if I always, with our kids, if you always do everything for them, you're taking away that learning process. You're taking away the opportunity for them to learn it for themselves. And it's really difficult. And I think it's especially difficult for coaches because they've watched the footage like 3, 4, 5 times. They really feel like they get it and they understand exactly what they want. And you need to sometimes allow the players to be empowered to make the wrong decision and learn from that and experience it, and then go from there. And that guided discovery that they can go through that allows them to then be able to implement on a weekend. So I think it's quite a few things. G, what about you?
Yeah, man, it's an interesting one. I was just making some notes. I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think sometimes there's not enough stress or pressure in training. So we talk about tactical awareness, the players having that ability to make decisions, and it kind of ties what you're talking about, the feedback loop. What am I seeing? What's the right decision to make? Is it kind of realistic in terms of what I'm going to be experiencing in the game? And I was fortunate enough in July to spend some time with the Boks, which was really interesting to see, was that they would do full on live scrums. And the backs would have a full go at each other, just for like in terms of their strike moves, having full on defense. So it was actually very realistic. So I think sometimes there's not enough stress or not enough disruption at training. But what intrigues me the most, because obviously I was fortunate enough to be coaching at probably one of the best championships in the world, in the top 14, and not only with our team but also with other teams. You're speaking to coaches, you would have a great training week, and then something happens in 2 days, like after the last training, the captains, and then the game day. Something happens where players switch off, and honestly, till today, a lot of us don't have that answer. I've got my ideas. What is the reason behind it? I think at the end of the day, if you're training well and it doesn't transfer to the game, for me, that means you're not actually conscious of what your mission is and what your job is. And I'm talking now from a player point of view. As a player, you've kind of forgotten about everything. I think there's so many distractions out there. You know, I can't judge players because when back in the day, I was a big fan of PlayStation. I used to play, but now guys are like really addicted. And now you've got social media, something which wasn't really there back then. We just recently had a guest on the pod that talked about back in the day we had our Nokias and our Blackberries. So we can't really judge the new generation, but it is worrying to see that sometimes they don't have that ability to switch on. They switch off so easily. So that really intrigues me as a coach. And I think it also comes down to the environment that is being set or the culture in the team. Like we might think, okay, we got a great team spirit, but team spirit doesn't mean the culture. Are the players really committed? I was listening to a podcast today, Ben, and it was quite interesting. It was this lady. She worked for the president. She was part of the Secret Service. Her name is Evie or Eva Pomperas. I hope I'm saying that correctly. My apologies. And she spoke about the difference between your authentic self and your genuine self. And she said, we always use this word being authentic. I use it. You got to be your authentic self. So what does that mean? The authentic self doesn't necessarily mean the best version of yourself in a professional setup. Okay, so you're joking about that's your authentic self, but when it comes to the mission at hand, you got to switch on. You got to be focused on your job, focus on your role. And I think it comes down to lack of commitment, really being committed to your actual job, really being committed to executing your role with perfection. Because there are times I believe that players slack down, and that's the reality of it. But then also, the coaches are responsible for it too. I believe, how are we educating the players? Are we helping them with, I call it the bridge between that Thursday training and the Saturday game? I think there's so many things going on, and I think for some players, and I'm talking maybe professional rugby players, it really has just become a job. It has really become a job. So when that last training is done, they switch off completely and they don't know how to reactivate it. For the amateur players, it could potentially be, it's a bit different, I think. It's not the same environment. It's not the same mindset. There, I believe it's maybe not having the full buy-in, maybe the conditions of the training is not that great. Maybe the conditions of the coaching or the method is not the best way. If you're shouting and screaming at the player and it's a player that doesn't really appreciate it, it's about understanding it. But I agree with you. It's complex. There is not an answer that we can just off the cuff of it, just say, right, these are the reasons why. But it's very intriguing. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Ben.
Yeah, it is. With the amateurs, I think, so say you're a parent and you're coaching your kid's age grade team, and they're, I don't know, 13, 14, 15. You're not a coach and you're relying on maybe what you've seen in the professional game, and you'll see a drill and then you're copying that, or you've watched some rugby and you're trying to implement that. And I don't think that that's necessarily the best thing for kids. I think, quite often they'll be using drills that are too complex or don't involve a lot of decisions being made. There's not a lot of variables. The kid doesn't know the context of it. So when will I do this in the game? And it doesn't really reflect the game. As opposed to playing games in training, they don't have to be, full tackle or smash, but they can be playing games so that you get a lot of touches on the ball. You're not standing around. You understand and appreciate the different flow, different movements. And then within that, you're giving lots of scenarios for your players to learn from in different positions. And I think that's really important. So, and I think for players, young players, that especially that, well, all of us, but young players, that's really fun. They want to keep doing that because they enjoy and they learn from that. And it's that guided discovery. You're learning from scenarios. I hated it when I was a player and you had the old 2-on-1 drill and everybody lines up in 2 lines and it takes flipping ages and you wait your turn, you're standing there getting cold and then you run round cones and it's just an old-fashioned 2-on-1. That doesn't really have any bearing on the game. It might be a 3 versus 2, it might be a 3 versus 1. There's lots of scenarios. And I found that doesn't have much carryover to the game. And similarly, I would say the better use of your time and to engage in those young people is really to play lots of games that allow them to have loads of touches and has more crossover to the game. And then with the professionals, I think coaches, we've made it far too complicated in the main. And you were trying to give them too much information too close to the game. And I think a lot of the time the players don't take ownership of that. But the way the brain works is, you can, the glucose is being, the brain's demanding more glucose and energy to try and understand something. It's a bit like when you were trying to revise for an exam, and you might be doing it the night before. And then you probably just want to switch off before the exam the next morning. But I know that I didn't do very well when I was still like walking to the exam trying to learn stuff. They were when I did really badly and you're trying to cram last minute. It's a similar sort of thing. I think you need to have done your work earlier in the week and then owned it. And the player needs to own it. And then they need to just get into that flow state instead of just worrying and going over it and over it again and again.
Yeah, so I've got something. I'm not sure if I'm going to be on track. So there's a few things you mentioned doing the work in a week. From my experience, a lot of professional rugby players are not doing the homework. They're not reviewing the training sessions. I mean, I've seen firsthand our players forget their roles in the line out in a move, and it's the same thing that hasn't changed over 2 years. So I do believe, and this is all over, all right? This is not just linked to one specific team. This is all over. This is me speaking to other coaches as well and their feedback at the highest level. I think that the work ethic is different. I think there's way much more pressure. So you just mentioned they just want to switch off. I think also we as coaches are also responsible for that because we have all these amazing tools. We got access to all this data, all the stats. We are spending so much time in front of our computers. So we get this information. For us, it's unbelievable. And just we want to share it and we just want to overwhelm it. And maybe sometimes we are losing the plot a bit instead of focus on developing genuine relationships with the players on a human level. The only discussions we are having with them is about rugby.
Mate,
it makes sense.
100%.
It's about rugby. Yeah. No, go for it.
Yeah, I think it was either like a few coaches, like rugby league coach Wayne Bennett, one of the best ever, Eddie Jones, I think, and a couple of others, maybe Wayne Smith. He's saying like your job now, even more so as a coach, is to filter all of that because you've got 100 bits of data and information. But what's the 2 big, most important things that they need to implement? And as you said, it's a powerful thing if you get everybody buying in and have a shared purpose, and they just to have those human connections, then they want to play for each other and play for, and put it all together. I think that's definitely powerful.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of other things as well because there are certain things we can't control, Ben. We don't know how players are behaving at home. Are they going out in the week? Are they sleeping late? I spoke to a player today, which I'm mentoring, and I asked him, so like, how much sleep do you get? Like, 6 to 7 hours. And I'm like, dude, that's not enough. And I can tell this from a personal point of view, Ben. It's been now 2 weeks. I eventually got the whoop, and I know there are mixed I can say reviews on it. Some say it's a bunch of shit. Other guys say it's a gimmick. It doesn't matter. But anyway, somebody that gave me some good advice and I decided to invest in it. And I can tell you this, it's helped me. I find that the data is actually accurate. I could be wrong. But it's helped me to sleep more. And just because maybe it's because I had to pay the subscription. So that may be keeping me accountable. But what I can say, since having more sleep, I'm feeling so much better. We are both under the pump at the moment. We are both in the process of launching various courses, and we've got a lot of projects going on for the podcast as well. But some players underestimate the power of sleep, and they're not getting the right sleep in. They're not eating the right things. They are not hydrated. There are a lot of reasons. So I think the big thing, if I was a player, and if I wanted to understand why am I having a good training week and I'm not capable of performing on the weekend. So everything. You need to check all the boxes. Am I practicing the right skills in the week? Am I hydrating? And you actually, by process of elimination, you gotta go through that. Am I actually reviewing my role, what I need to do? Is it maybe mentally that when I switch off, I can't reactivate, or it's actually that performance anxiety which we're speaking about? And coaches, for example, you got to deep dive because each team is different. What we're talking about here, we're just having a conversation about it. We're potentially not providing the solution, but it's something which I'm really interested in because I've seen so often that coaches keep on spending time on the strategy, and planning the training sessions. But when there's clear disconnect between what you are training and what you're executing on the field, something else is going on. And you need to get to the bottom of that. And the only way you can get to the bottom of that, I believe, is actually connecting with players on a human level, understanding what they're doing, get as much information as possible.
Yeah, good. On that one, it's really interesting. You just reminded me. So I remember when I was working with guys like Jesse Creel at the Bulls a few years ago. Jesse wants all the detail. He's one of the best players in the world, but he wants all the detail. He wants to know exactly what his opponent's going to do, who does this, what the 10 opposite him's going to do, how he favors, does he stutter step, does he always take 2 steps to the right before he kicks across, he wants all that detail. But other players would say, I'm focusing on me. Just don't muddle me this close to a game. I just want to know this. The other thing I was going to say is, and it's you're talking about player ownership and are they watching training and reviewing training? It's a really good point you make. It reminded me also of when I'm coaching 16, 17, 18-year-olds, after a couple of sessions, I can look at them and go, that one watches rugby, that one doesn't, that one watches, and you'll soon tell because there will just be little things they do and nuances, and they'll have an understanding, and so and you've spoken about that before. It's amazing how many young players nowadays don't even watch the game. That's really interesting and relevant, I think.
It's just something that came in because obviously there's a few topics that I spoke about in the week, and I mentioned a few case studies over the last 2 weeks as well. I mentioned this with one player that had a poor scrum. He got in his own head, and they end up having a poor scrum session. Then a poor scrum session led to a poor split session, and a poor split session led to a horrible training day. So sometimes maybe I think, Ben, from a player's point of view, and guys, we're just having a conversation here. I was a player. I've had clear disconnect as well. In my case, it was a bit of arrogance because I thought, okay, I've been good this week. I just have to pitch up. I've made that mistake. So I'm not here to judge. But I also think sometimes you have a poor training session and you felt like you let the team down. You felt like you let yourself down. And then you start to get in your own head. So now this is Thursday. You have a captain's run, but you're still stuck in your own head about the mistakes you made in the week, how you messed up. Now you start asking yourself questions. Will I be able to execute it correctly? Will I be able to perform? Then it starts to develop this whole performance anxiety. And I think sometimes as well, players are mentally potentially drained. So by the time when they get to the game, there's nothing. There's no energy. So I think that's why it's also important to kind of find a way to wind down and also to manage your mental load as a player, which is very important. That's why I believe we as coaches have the responsibility to really learn the art of observation, observing the body language of the player. When is he on? Actually making a note. When he's performing, how was he in the week? When he's not performing, kind of reverse engineering it. Instead of just saying, listen, that wasn't good enough. We all respond. And I think for the players that listen, because we got a lot of players that listen to our pod, professional, semi-professional, coaches, vice versa. And just need to be clear that players are 50% responsible for the performance, and so are coaches. 50%, all right? Everybody has ownership in the stake of performance. But it would be really great if we can find a way, and maybe Bren, in our masterclass and working on that, we'll be able to give a blueprint to players and to coaches on how to understand why there's a clear disconnect, why what you're training is not transferring to the game. But yeah, this is an interesting topic.
Mate, yeah, loads to discuss, mate.
Is there anything else you would like to add, Ben, before we sign off on this topic?
No, mate. No, it's a big topic, but I'm looking forward to us talking about it and addressing it in more detail, yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe what would be great, Ben, if the people that are listening to this topic, if they think they can add value to this conversation, maybe drop a comment in YouTube or Spotify in this episode, or even better, join us in our own private community here, Lessons from the Game community. We're still small. This is a great place where you guys can link up with us. So just on our Lessons from the Game podcast Instagram page, drop us a DM with the words community, or even on one of our posts, and we will send you guys the link. You'll receive an automated message with that. But Ben, talking on that school, I know it's been an interesting journey over the last few weeks. I think it's almost 2 months now that we've both been in school, and it's been a great place for us to connect. Is there any interesting stories that you can share from your experience so far in school?
I don't know about interesting stories, G, but I mean, it's really fascinating. I find it fascinating that you're connecting with people from all over the world. You might have a call and someone's coming from the US, someone from South Africa, someone from the Far East. One of the guys is in Seoul, Korea. So it's really cool to be able to, and everybody's walked a journey and got experiences. So everybody's got valuable input. It's not just, us talking and everybody else is listening. It's a community. So I'm really enjoying that element of it. What about you?
No, it's been great. I'll be honest with you. It's been giving me deeper insights into what the younger players are really struggling with. That performance anxiety, lack of confidence. They're constantly doubting themselves. I just jumped off on a call with the player. He had a great preseason. He's been training well. He's got great feedback from the coaches, but he's not playing this weekend because he's playing for a club team, and one of the Premiership players came down to get game time, and it was tough for him to take, and it started creating this unnecessary doubt for him, and I had to reassure him. And this shows you that we forget sometimes what players are going through, when they don't get selected. So you give them positive feedback, and then when they're not selected, for them that's a negative gesture, and then they're like all confused. So maybe there's a bit of homework for coaches, but also I'm enjoying the community because I get to speak to coaches that are coaching at the amateur level, and to see the amount of detail they're going through, it's impressive. Some of them have done the Crusaders leadership program. You've had them on your school community call, which has been amazing. But I think the most important for me, which I'm enjoying the most, is the feedback that I'm getting. Is that coaches and players say, wow, that's actually so simple. Or I didn't think about that. What you just shared this week helped me. I applied it. All of a sudden, I'm getting messages from players and coaches saying, listen, my performance has gone up. My game has leveled up. But what I really enjoy, because like you just mentioned, both of us, we got our separate communities. And maybe just to clarify our audience listening, like, guys, you're confusing me. You're talking about Lessons from the Game has got his own community. Ben, he has his own community. And I have my own community as well. Okay, so just clarify that. And we both are serving our communities. And the great thing about that, Ben, is that everybody's adding value, like the comments. So it's not social media. We're not doing this for validation. People are asking great questions. But I think most importantly is that how people have come together online, and we've developed such great relationships. And a lot of us haven't even met actually almost all of us, we haven't met in person,
Yeah.
And both of us are example of that relationships that are made online doesn't mean it can become something which is real and authentic, which was the case with us. We met on Clubhouse back in the day, and we were chatting for years. Then we met in person, what was it, last year or a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
And boom, we got a podcast. Listen from the game. Here we go.
Yeah, modern world, man.
Now, awesome stuff. All right, Ben. So I need to get packing because actually talking about school, I still got about 49 notifications to answer, and let me just check over here, about 15 DMs. So I still need to get that
Nice,
done.
man.
We're talking about school, but yeah, is there anything else you would like to share with our audience? Anything going on? Anything you would like to?
No, I
Put in
mean,
the
there's loads
spotlight?
going on, but no, there's loads going on. We've been droning on a bit, but we're looking forward to talking more about this subject as well that we've been talking about today. I think there's a lot to go into, and you know, both of us have had feedback in our communities around this. So keep tuning in, and we're going to address a lot of this stuff, you know.
Yeah, so just literally having a fly they sit on my head just made me think I wish it could be a fly on the wall in different teams and try and get all the inside scopes on what's going on. But yeah, great chat, Ben. Really appreciate that. And also to our audience, thank for all the support. We really do appreciate it. Our Instagram pages are growing, YouTube pages as well. But definitely would really love your help to continue to grow the show. So if you can continue to like, follow, and subscribe. And we're really looking forward to taking the show to the next level. And so if you do know of anyone that can help us with that, we are open. We're here to learn as well. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for a great episode.
Cheers, G.
Ciao,
Thanks,
ciao.
mate.